Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of My Name is Dad. I am your host, Brandon Benson. And before we get started, let's just talk about the sponsor, Point B Grading and Turfcraft Maintenance, LLC. Check us out at pointbgrading.com for all your landscaping needs. And get those baseball and softball fields ready for the upcoming spring season. This is the time to do it. So check us out, pointbgrading.com, or email pointbgrading@gmail. All right, we are back, I believe, part 15 of another Who I Am series. And I believe where we left off, Miss Lilo, the Neapolitan Mastiff, has joined our life. And she's quite a handful. She has probably caused more problems than she should. But she's got a good personality, and I love her very much. Now, I was thinking back, we're still kind of trying to get out of COVID, but we keep going back to it. I guess a lot happened, or stuff I keep remembering. I remember when we got our stimulus checks for COVID, and we also, me and Miss White also got a little bit of money when her grandfather passed away, and we used some of that money to basically do our backyard. So we bought the house, and the backyard was not finished; it was just dirt, and there was like one oleander shrub by the kitchen window that would overgrow all the time. I always have to go down and cut it down. But we used this money. We decided we're going to use this money to finish our backyard. And to give Miss White credit, I do a lot of bashing of Miss White, but we're going to try to change that up in this one a little bit. But we're still going to complain. Miss White, she did help. We didn't pay anybody to come and do the backyard. We did it all of ourselves. We painted the back wall in our yard. It was like this terrible orange color, whatever they painted it, when they built the place. So we painted the back wall of our yard. I had built on the back, at the very back, it was sloped, for like rain runoff and all that stuff. I had built a little small retaining wall, and we added, like a quarter minus, DG patio area that we made, and we had a little brick border around it and stuff. And that's where we also put our fire ring and stuff and some chairs. I added some sprinklers, some irrigation we had a little small grass area. I think it was like 400 square feet. It wasn't very big, but it was nice, It was a place for the dog to poop and the kids to run around a little bit. And we also added a bunch of rock. We had, to go along with the quarter minus, we had 1-inch screened rock that we put back there. We also added a bunch of shrubs that along in that retention area, that slope that I mentioned that had drip irrigation. So we added some stuff there. We got new backyard furniture, and again we had to move this quarter minus and this rock, which they dump it out in the front of your house on the street, and we had to move it to the backyard, and we didn't have anything except a wagon and a wheelbarrow. So me and Miss White and my older son Brody, we moved it all back there. We shoveled it into the wheelbarrow and hauled it back and then dumped it. Miss White and my older son Brody, this is also the time when he got a tortoise for some reason. Somehow we got a tortoise, and they built a little enclosure for him in the backyard and everything, But again, as always, it actually turned out really, really nice. But Miss White, all she did was basically complain about the backyard. That there were too many flies. Or she didn't like sitting back there when Lila was back there. And she didn't like the furniture. The furniture wasn't comfortable. We got, chairs. I don't know how many times we got chairs. So again, it was like this great experience for making our kids, get out and help us and do some work. And it was like middle of the summer when we did this. And it felt like a little ruined, that Miss White just basically hated it so much. I don't know why. Just complained about it all the time. That was kind of, again, it was supposed to be like this really cool thing that we did together as a family. And it felt like that for a minute. But then, of course, the complaints started coming. So I mentioned also about this time, this is when I decided to leave the city of Peoria. Now, during COVID, a lot of the people, I went to work. I was, essential, quote unquote. But a lot of people, work from home, and then we had tons of virtual meetings about, just about how are things going to change, and how are we going to do business after COVID, and what are the things we're going to change, and how are things going to change, and what do we have to be prepared for that stuff, and all these things, right? But as soon as we came out of COVID, at least in my division where I work, the community parks and the sports complex, we basically had to go straight back to normal. Basically, how it was before, we got to go back to that. And we were not prepared or ready, or, we didn't have the resources that we did before. I mean, especially, once coming out of COVID, if you remember, there were supply shortages everywhere. And, the price of fertilizer for the grass had almost quadrupled or something like that. It was something crazy. We couldn't get grass seed to overseed with. We couldn't get employees. But we were expected to go back to business as usual. And, a lot of the supervisors, we kind of we were kind of, talking to our management in our meetings and stuff and saying like, hey, what's going on here? How come we're doing this? I thought we had all these meetings about changes we were going to make, and we're not doing any of those. It's just back to normal. And we would tell them how hard it is to get resources and people and labor and just supplies and stuff like that. It was hard. It was really, really hard. And it just always kind of felt like it fell on deaf ears. We didn't have enough employees, so all the supervisors were doing their job, maybe doing the person above them's job because they weren't there. And we were definitely doing the people below us job because they weren't there either. So whoever was there was doing at least 2 jobs, if not 3 or more. And a lot of people just were starting to get kind of really fed up about it. And I guess I was kind of one. It just kind of feels that like my goals and, everything that I wanted to get done was not even considered. It was, we got to go back to the way it was and just play ball. Just do it the way we want to do it. That's the way we've always done it. And that's not what I was about. That's not why I wanted the supervisor job at the sports complex. So what I did, I just kind of started looking around, and I found this job. It was posted, I don't know, on Indeed or whatever it was. And it was this local guy who was looking for a supervisor, and he was basically a landscape contractor, and he had a maintenance contract for a couple of the local charter schools close to where I lived. So that was really nice that they were there. And I ended up getting the job, interviewed with the guy a couple times, and he hired me on. And he tried to pay me as close as he could as I was making before. But it didn't, to me, that didn't really matter because I was so much closer to where I lived. My commute was now 5 minutes instead of 45 minutes. So that was really nice. And this is where we did an episode together, a couple months ago. This is where I met my new best friend, Jesus. And it made me kind of think about, like, I guess I probably never really talked a lot about my friends because I never really had a lot of friends. Not that I'm not social or anything, but, I don't know. I just, I always had just a couple close friends. But I always met them through work, and people move on. They go find another job, or I go to another job. And you kind of, not that I ever lost touch with those people, but we didn't hang out as much as we used to. So, I always had a lot of friends, or at least a lot of friends for a period of time. But, our couples friends that, are, parents that we've met through the time, they were friends, but I wouldn't consider them close friends or anything like that. So, and really, like, like my high school friends, they all moved out of state or did whatever. I still keep in contact with these people, but we're not close friends, and really, my wife at the time was supposed to be my best friend. At least that's what she would tell me. And, she was supposed to be my best friend, but and we were supposed to be a team together. Turns out that wasn't really the case. But I became best friends with this guy, Jesus, and we basically had a lot in common. We both kind of suffered from anxiety, and we were able to bond over that. And kids our kids are a little bit about the same age, and we worked in the same field, and he's really, really smart about what he does, and I like to think that I'm smart about what I do too. So he likes to drink beer, I like to drink beer. So it was like it became a thing pretty quick. And the thing that I really, really enjoyed about working at this new job. One thing, it was a lot closer to my house, but also gave me a little bit more freedom to coach my son's, be assistant coach for my son's football team, assistant coach for his little league team. I eventually coached, the school baseball team and all that stuff. So it really gave me definitely a lot more freedom to do those type of things, which was great. And me and Miss White, we were always, we are and always have been very supportive of our kids and their sports and extracurricular activities. My youngest one, Maverick, he's an actor, so he likes to do acting and stuff like that. And, he's done a dance class, singing, like all this stuff. We've always been very, very supportive of that. But as I mentioned, Miss White, she didn't always want to take the kids to the doctor and the dentist. She always put that responsibility on me. And it would always be like, oh, the kids need a dentist appointment. Brandon, can you call tomorrow and set all that up and then take the kids to the dentist? And I was like, yeah, sure, I guess so. Not that I don't have work or anything like you do, but, that's always how it was. It was always put on me. It was always my responsibility to do that stuff. For whatever reason, you have to ask her. I know what she'll tell you, but she's full of shit. But again, Miss White, she would usually go to, she went to all the games. I don't think she ever really missed a game unless she absolutely couldn't. But, she would go to most of the practices, but she didn't really want to go to the practices, She would definitely rather stay home and just sleep and do whatever she does. But I started noticing that Miss White would only want to participate in things if her friends were there or her family was going to be involved. So, she would go to the practice. Oh, my friend so-and-so is going to be there, so I'll go today. Like, okay, well, that that shouldn't be the only reason you're going, but this sort of pattern, I started noticing this pattern in all the things that we did. Our vacations, us having dates. It would, she didn't really want to do it unless it was a double date. Or we did the Christmas parade for Buckeye one time, and she really only wanted to do it or made it a priority because she involved her, our couple's friends who had kids and families and wanted them to be involved. So now she was so excited for it. Vacations, especially if it involved my family, she definitely never wanted to go. She would bitch and complain about having to go and do this, how terrible it was going to be. And whenever it was something with her family, she was always so excited. And her family, every time they got together, was just a big drama fest. Like, absolutely every time. We went for Thanksgiving one time, we went to Texas. We went to the Texas Tech game, and she just bitched and complained that she has to go to this. It's not going to be fun. It's going to be cold. Every little thing she can come up with, just being a negative Nancy anytime, it was me and her were going to go out on a date or do something. We wanted to take the kids skiing. Oh, and she just was negative Nancy. She can't find ski boots, and she didn't like the hotel, and she didn't like this, she didn't like that. Just a lot of times, just almost basically ruining the trips and the dates for us because of how negative she was getting. But really, I started noticing the pattern that she only wanted to do things if her family was going to be involved. Like we did a 2-week camping trip for summer vacation one time, and she was excited for it because our first stop, her mom came to visit. Second stop, her brother was gonna come up and visit. The third stop, one of her good friends from California came to visit. But the last stop she wasn't too excited about because, that was the place I wanted to go. And she bitched and complained and how terrible it was. But really, it wasn't that bad. It was a good time. Like, we had fun. Like, I don't understand why just always the negative attitude when it was going to be just me and her. It's just another one of those things where, I just didn't really feel like a priority in her life, or she really wanted to be with me, It's just, it wears on you over time when that kind of stuff happens. And even a lot of times, her friends would invite her to go somewhere, go do something, and she did not want to do it. Oh, she would just, her almost always her initial reaction was negative. Oh, this is going to be terrible, or this is not going to be fun, or I don't want to do this, or, there were times when, my parents would come to town, and Miss White always, she always claimed to have this stomach issue, that it would pop up conveniently, a lot of the times, or whatever. It always seemed to pop up especially when she didn't want to do something. And there were a lot of times when my parents would come to visit our house, and, she would get stomach issues, and, she would be upstairs by herself, and me and the kids and my parents, we'd all be downstairs talking and laughing, having a good time. And, they would say, where's Miss White? And I would say, well, she's upstairs. She's upstairs sick, quote unquote. And I always kind of felt like I was lying for her. I was covering for her, to my own parents, but I think they knew, and I knew that, she was just kind of avoiding because she didn't like it. She didn't want to be there. She didn't want the family there, or my parents there. So again, it's just another thing where it's just another thing where it just felt like she didn't really want me around. A lot of the times. There are other things, like when, just looking at my notes here, me and Miss White, we would go out on dates, and, I would be like, okay, we're going to go to dinner. We're going to do this. We can go get a drink afterward. And she never wanted to have a drink, because she would always say, it upsets my stomach. So we would just go to dinner, and that's it. Then go home, But Miss White, she used to use, maybe she still does, I don't know. She used to use cannabis gummies, and when they were legal, of course. And she would be like, yeah, let's go out and let's party a little bit. Let's go out and have a good time. And then we would go, and I'd be like, oh, did you bring your gummies? And she'd, oh, no, I forgot them. I don't think we ever went on a date where we were going to go out and have a drink or do whatever, and she wanted to bring her gummies, but she forgot them 100% of the time. Now, if she's going out with her friends, she did not forget them 100% of the time. She always remembered her gummies when she was going out with her friends. But, me and her wanted to go out and have a good time. She always forgot them. Then she would get stomach issues, and we just go home by 8:30, and that was it. That was date night, So again, it's just another pattern that I'm seeing throughout most of our marriage. And it's another red flag for me, again, that my wife didn't really want me around, didn't really want to be with me. It just felt like she was putting out as little effort as possible just to keep me from, like, complaining, or just to keep me kind of happy, But deep down, it really did hurt. And what I would do is I would be hurt, and I'd be upset. But I would always kind of just talk myself out of it, be like, oh, this is just normal. This is like what, every marriage is like this, or this is just life. That's just how it is. Or, I can't be critical of my wife because that's wrong, or whatever it is. I would always talk myself out of it. But then, later, after I kind of went through my therapy and everything, and it was like, oh no, those red flags and those feelings were legit, and you did have a right to be kind of upset, and your feelings are valid, and those thoughts you had were valid, that you were not happy about that stuff. And kind of what I would do, I would always kind of talk myself out of it, and then I wouldn't talk to her about it. I would just wake up the next day feeling better, and then life would move on. And I said that I was going to kind of talk about myself, beat myself up a little bit. I think the next couple episodes I might be beating myself up a little bit. But one of my coping mechanisms, as I said, I would, I'd just talk myself out of it and wake up in the morning feeling better. But one of my other coping mechanisms was drinking alcohol, drinking beer. I do drink a lot of beer. I'm not going to lie about it. I do. I love to have a beer after work, with dinner. Watching a football game, and I do go out binge drinking every once in a while for special occasion, a concert, or whatever it is, And Miss White used to be a drinker. She used to, when we were younger, she wanted to go out every weekend and have some drinks and do all that stuff. And we always had a good time. But I've been drinking basically since I was in high school. And all the time I've been with Miss White. This is not something that's ever been hidden or people don't know about, whatever it is, But Miss White would always, one of her tactics was she would always kind of keep this in her back pocket to use against me. So like the first time we went to couples therapy, and if the therapist kind of was pushing back on her on something she didn't like what he said, she would instantly kind of, bring out this card. Well, Brandon drinks, What about, aren't you going to talk to Brandon about his drinking? And to her, she always kind of kept it in her back pocket like a get out of jail free card. And again, I think she always kind of kept that loaded for when needed, break open when possible or when needed. If you're in a jam, you can always blame Brandon and drinking because it'll always make him look bad and her like a victim. And that's exactly what happened. So again, I admit that I drink a lot of beer, got a nice good beer gut on me and everything. I do use it as a coping mechanism. I know I shouldn't, but I do, to deal with my anxiety and depression and stress. I know that the more stressed I am, the more depressed I am, the more I will be drinking more. But I can say, for 100% certainty, I have never, ever been violent to my wife or my kids, or to anyone really, because of drinking. There are absolutely zero domestic violence reports, no 911 phone calls. There's no photos of bruises or broken windows or anything like that. There are none because it never happened. I never did anything like that to my wife or kids or really anybody. I may have a drinking problem, but I'm fully functional. I drank while I went to college twice. I built a career, had a family, got married, had kids. Was taking care of the family, supporting my family, doing all those things, bought a house, and started a business, and also having to deal with a narcissistic wife. But just to point out that, you may hear that, oh, Brandon's a drunk, he's alcoholic, but again, there's negative connotations that come with that, and that's what Miss White would do. She would tell my mom those things, and my mom would be like, well, is he violent? She'd be like, oh, no, because I never was. So just, again, beating myself up, I'm just admitting I am not perfect. I know I complain a lot about Miss White on here, but I'm not perfect either. And just being 100% honest with everybody. All right, so to get back on track a little bit, I'm working for this landscape contractor, and I always kind of had this idea of starting my own business. And even part of when I got hired, I shared this idea with this landscape contractor. Now, and I discussed it with them, and he said, "Oh, I'll think it over." He didn't really like the idea. It's fine. But again, when I worked in sports, you get your baseball and you get your baseball field laser leveled, which is how you think everything. How do they get that infield so smooth? Well, they get laser leveled. That's what they do. And I learned how to do this working for the city of Peoria. Now I always thought, I really like doing this. I think this is a great business idea. I should do this someday. And I always had that in the back of my mind, for years. But then, when I was working for this landscape contractor and I brought the idea to him, I was kind of thinking he might be the one to sort of be the financial backing for it and get the equipment and all that stuff. But he wasn't too interested in doing that, which is fine. So I decided that I'm gonna try to do this, and I told him I'm gonna try to do this. So basically, I kind of just started out with doing a business plan and everything, and I think maybe that's kind of where maybe we'll pick up on the next episode, starting Point B Grading, the sponsor you hear before every episode. But I think we'll just kind of leave off for there for now. And we'll start off where I'm starting a business. My marriage still deteriorates, and I really want to try to make some real good money for once. I always would say that, like you work for like the city or a government or something like that. You work hard, like you work your ass off for a 2% raise at the end of the year. And I finally just got to the point where I'm like, I want all my hard work and all that stuff to go into my pocket, not into the government's pocket or my boss's pocket. I want it to go into my pocket. I want to be able to share that hard work and that money with my family. So that was kind of the reason why I kind of decided to go out on my own and take the risk and do that. So again, we'll pick up there, I think, next episode. Thanks for listening. You can catch this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and all that stuff. And we'll catch you on the flip side. Thanks.